Good evening, everybody. How are you doing today? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I apologize. I'm working at multiple remotes, so if I screw something up, I apologize in advance. Thank you all for coming out here today. You know, in DuPage County, the state's attorney and the county sheriff are actually doing these. Unfortunately, we don't have in Cook County a county sheriff or a state's attorney that really care about informing the public about this particular act. So they're doing one like 3 days a week all over there. So we decided to do this because I thought it was a really good idea, because I've been to one that they've done. And Chief Rossi is here with me. I think trustees, we have Trustee Milani I saw in the house somewhere, and Trustee Katsinas over here as well. Earlier today, Trustee Radishevsky was here, and I forgot to point her out. I was glad she could make it out to one of our events. But 2 in a day is pretty tough for her. She's still recuperating. So thank you all for coming out. So today we're going to talk about the Safety Act. And you've heard a lot of things that are out there. And we're going to give you the facts. And the facts are there are some good things in this bill, way overshadowed, in my opinion, by the bad things that are in the bill. So it was passed formally in 2021. It pertains to criminal justice, pre-arrest diversion, policing, pretrial sentencing, and corrections. So it's a huge bill. This bill was given, I believe, about 4 o'clock in the morning to the Senate. They had 40 minutes. This is the bill. So anybody who thinks you can read something like that in 40 minutes, good luck. They basically passed it in 40 minutes with a minimum number of votes. It eventually passed the House the same day. This was in the lame duck session, last day of the lame duck. Got signed by Governor Pritzker. There was a trailer bill modifying in May, and then there was another one in this last January as well, modifying the bill. So it's been modified twice already. So that's what we have right now. So effective July of this last year, these things, and these are the good parts of the act. Most of this we already did well before this was put into place. A lot of departments already did this. Not all of them did, which is why some of this was mandated. One of the problems with a lot of this is it's unfunded, so a lot of smaller municipalities maybe can't afford to do some of these training things. But these are the things that are in there. So things like it requires reporting of deaths in police custody. I think we'd all agree a good thing. Expands police training on use of force, crisis intervention, as well as first aid training. Good thing, not funded, correct? We already do it, so we funded it, but a lot of towns can't. Requires statewide standards and services for officers to receive regular mental health screenings and assistance and counseling that's confidential. We instituted that, I believe, the first of this year, right? So we're kind of leading edge. And again, we're leading edge, so we do all of these things, all right? And some other departments do as well. We require departments to participate in the FBI's use of force database. We prohibit chokeholds. Since I've been here and before, we've prohibited that. It imposes upon a police the duty to intervene if there's excessive force from another officer. That's been in place since I've been here and well before that. It enhances whistleblower protections, bans the use of certain military equipment, requires the maintenance of police misconduct records, expands the officer misconduct database, removes public discipline from the collective bargaining process, and that's still being arbitrated with the unions, but essentially it's saying that the unions can't grieve a decision for disciplinary for use of force. Requires the use of body cameras statewide by 2025. This is another unfunded mandate. It's very, very expensive. Now the Village of Orland Park, our officers want it, our union wants it, our chief wants it. We approved it before this act was passed. Then we delayed implementing them because the act was passed. Because when the act was first passed, it said that an officer is required to use the body cam, but then the officer cannot access the body camera to write their police report. Okay? But if there was any discrepancy in the police report from the body camera, the officer could be disciplined and have charges filed against him. So let's see, we're trying to get the facts, and we won't let him use the camera that he wants to use to write a good report, and then we're gonna, because we all know our memories aren't perfect, right? So we refused as a board to put our officers in body cameras until they fixed this. That was one of the trailer bills, they did fix that, okay? But it's an unfunded mandate. Very expensive because you have to maintain all of that footage for a long time, okay? And then, not only the storage requirements, but then there's FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, that you have to go back and get that footage. Okay? So also very expensive to do that. Now the Village of Orland Park, we have a lot of resources, and we've found a way to do that, pay for it by making some other adjustments in how we do things. A lot of towns can't afford this. Some towns can't even afford their police officers and have turned that over to the state. Now, something that's very important, and it's a little bit of a nuance for those of us in local government, but there's a fund called the Local Government Distributive Fund. And what it is, it's shared income tax from the state to municipalities. And it was agreed upon in the 60s when an income tax was first put in that they would share 10% of what they brought in to all the municipalities in the state on a per capita basis. Obviously, we pay more tax per capita than the average citizen in Illinois, so we get a little bit less, but this gets distributed to everybody, okay, including the city of Chicago. And the whole idea was that the towns agreed not to ever implement their own income tax, particularly the city of Chicago. Okay, so that's why this was done. In 2011, they reduced that to 6%. Or actually to 5.5%. They've now given it back, is what they say. We're at 6%. I'm going to put this in real dollars for you. The Village of Orland Park, over $5 million a year for 11 years that we have not gotten. How many roads, how many parks, how many capital projects? I can tell you half of the capital projects we can't figure out how to fund for the next 5 years could be paid for by that. Okay? That's Orland Park. Imagine some of the towns of the east, Calumet Park, Posen, Harvey. They could pay for police officers and their body cameras with that LGDF money that they would be entitled to. Okay? So my plea to the state is, if you want to put this in place, fine, we're all for it. Return LGDF so everyone can pay for it. Because right now it's an unfunded mandate that has to come out of their budgets. So, next. So those are the good parts. There are some good things in there about policing. 100 of 102 states' attorneys oppose this act. Okay? The ones that support it, Kim Foxx and Eric Reinhart, who's a disciple of Kim Foxx and George Soros as well. Okay? So that's who supports it. 100 oppose it. They are Democrats and Republicans of all nationalities, oppose this act. Okay? 12 of them, Democrats and Republicans alike, over 12, over a dozen now, have filed a lawsuit to stop this act. And I'll probably get questions on it, so I'll answer that later. But as to the why of that, there's a lot of constitutional issues with this, both Illinois state constitution and U.S. constitutional issues with this law. So I haven't read every complaint, but that's why they're opposing this act. So effective January, so these are the reasons why they're opposing it. Effective January 1st, 2023, it eliminates monetary bail. So they can either hold someone or not. But they can only hold someone for certain offenses, which we'll go into. For all those other offenses, they have to prove one of two things, okay, to hold them. One is willful flight, that they are the likelihood of flight by clear and convincing evidence, and you cannot use previous history. So if they've fled 10 times before, that doesn't mean anything. It's only, can you prove they're going to do it in the future? How do you prove someone's going to do something in the future? The only way you can prove it is if they admit to an officer that they're going to flee. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to prove this. The other, so as it says here in the law, simple past non-appearance in court alone is not evidence of future intent to evade prosecution. Okay? The second thing is it shifts the burden of prosecutors to prove by clear and convincing evidence that a defendant poses a real and present threat to the safety of a specific, identifiable person or persons. So, here's an example. Second-degree murder is not one of the things that's detainable, so it has to be a threat to a person or willful flight. Person kills his wife in a fit of rage. It's not first-degree murder, it's second-degree murder. That person is no longer a threat to her. She's not here anymore. So he doesn't get help. That's kind of the real world of this. These are the ones that there is no detainment unless a threat of specific person or flight risk. These are just some of them. There's about seven offenses that they can be held for: murder and Class X felonies. Okay? Aggravated battery. So that's striking somebody. Aggravated discharge of a weapon. Aggravated DUI. Aggravated fleeing. Arson, burglary. Drug-induced homicide, fentanyl death that somebody induced in somebody, can't detain them. Intimidation, kidnapping, robbery, second-degree murder, stealing up to $500,000, threatening a public official, invading a vehicle. Those are all things that they cannot be held for, okay? And for those people who say, well, you know, it's giving judges discretion. Judges have discretion now. As we see in Cook County, they're letting all these people go free. Judges have that discretion now. They're taking away judges' discretion. They're taking away judges' discretion. So that is what's happening. They're defining exactly what they're going to do. They can only do it if they find them to be a threat to a specific person or a flight risk. By the way, this is one of the reasons why it's being sued multiple times, because in the Illinois Constitution, it says that judges are solely determine whether someone is a flight risk or not. This is legislators determining it. So, or determining whether or not they should be detained. Escape. So this is another problem with the law. They have to be in violation of their home detention for 48 hours before you can go look for them. 48 hours. Someone can drive to Alaska in 48 hours. Okay? State's attorneys. These are from state's attorneys, right? These categories of offenses, such as all drug offenses, all aggravated DUIs, forcible felonies, which you can receive probation, which is what it says in there, which include robbery, burglary, arson, aggravated battery, where judges have no discretion. They cannot detain defendants in those cases unless the state proves willful flight risk, which I already told you will be impossible to prove, or in planning or attempting to intentionally evade prosecution by concealing oneself, very difficult to prove, right? And this is the Will County State's Attorney. Now that's a Republican up top, that's a Democrat down below. If I can't lock up violent offenders, we have the same situation here as in Cook County, where pretrial release of previously convicted felons who face new charges is common. When criminals realize there are no boundaries, they are more brazen, they'll do even more crimes. I mean, we've seen what's happening in Cook County with these policies, right? So this is the problem, okay? Does anybody here think that the value system of Chicago and Kim Foxx is what we should bring to Orland Park, DuPage County, and the rest of the state? No. But maybe they might benefit from having our value system there, okay? Right. Okay. State's attorneys. Now this is a statement by multiple state's attorneys that was in a press release statement. So that this law proposes all defendants with criminal acts should be released from custody without posting monetary bail. The abolition of cash bail is set to go into effect January 1st, 2023, which will cause major public safety issues. For instance, violent offenders who are released on electronic monitoring and choose to violate the terms of their release have to be in violation for 48 hours before law enforcement can do anything about it. So, and then there's another comment from Bob Orland. So these are just some of the comments. Like I said, there's 12 lawsuits from state's attorneys already, and there'll be more. And many of them will join. So, I already told you, Kim Foxx supports this. This is Kim, so we know her current policies are as minimal bail as possible. Actually, her policies are actually tougher than this law, okay? So this is worse. This is Kim Foxx's policies on steroids, right? Current pretrial practices, this is the impact it's had on Orland Park, okay? In 2021, we recovered over 71 illegal guns. Now, mind you, as I've said many times, our index crimes, crimes against you, crimes against property, are down, okay? We are getting these criminals off the street before they commit a crime, because they come here, they don't usually commit crimes in Orland because they know they're going to get caught, okay? But they come here to eat and shop, and they come here to do that because, and they don't come here to shoplift here because they get caught. They come here to do, because they don't have stores where they're at, where they live. They don't have restaurants where they live, so they come here, okay? But we catch them with illegal plates, expired plates and traffic stops, you know, a speeding traffic stop, and then it escalates to we can look inside the car, we see a gun, we see drugs, we see something like that, and then this escalates to weapons being taken off the street, okay? In this year, it's actually higher than this now, it's 109 firearms. 110. It was 109 this morning, now it's 110. So it's going up. 90, so that's 91 offenders now, because it was 90 today, so earlier today. So it's 91 now. So that's you know, almost 160 people we've gotten off the street before they've committed a crime. So when we say crime is down, it is, but our police officers are busy. And we're having to be very proactive because of the policies of Kim Foxx. This is weapons arrests. Okay? So, some of the weapons we've grabbed. In 2021, 18% of offenders were on bond or felony probation. That number's higher this year. 7 of them were out of custody on bond or on probation for aggravated UUW as it was. By the way, not aggravated UUW, that would be something they're mandatory to release. Of note, 1 offender was a juvenile on probation for home invasion, Class X felony. That will actually be something detainable. But he's already released. You think they're actually going to detain him when they're already releasing him? No. 17 offenders had prior gun arrests. Okay? This is 24% of all the gun offenders. By the way, these are illegal weapons. These are violating the law currently. Okay? These are not law-abiding citizens with weapons that have a FOID card or have a CCL or have both. That's what this is. Okay? Out on bond. 8 of the offenders were out on bond. Weapon arrest committed new offenses while out on bond. Okay? So this is what we're seeing. Now, Chicago, on pace, this was an August article, on pace for 6 times as many carjackings as 8 years ago. Okay? Chief, non-detainable, right? Vehicle invasion, non-detainable. Carjacking. Okay? So, on pace for 1,960 carjackings in 2022, which beats the record that we set last year, 1,848 in Cook County. There's very few, by the way, here in Orland Park. You may have heard differently, but we've had very few. What, have we had 5 since I've been mayor? So 5 in 5 years. So very few. More than we should, but again, they're afraid of getting caught here. Okay? Happens a lot in the city. Whoop, we just lost it. There we go. So here, this is even, we've been dealing a little bit with this bond issue for a while. Okay? Here's the thing that's even a little bit scarier. It's what they've done with trespassing. So trespassing has been lowered to a Class B misdemeanor. Okay? And Class B and C misdemeanors have been changed, and this 764 pages mandates that law enforcement shall issue a citation in lieu of a custodial arrest. Now, you're an attorney. Shall's a pretty important word in the legal profession, isn't it? It means they have to do that.
It's a direction.
It's a direction that they have to issue a citation. That means they can't put a hand on someone and remove him from the property, or they can be sued civilly. The village can be sued civilly. Okay? So they can't put a hand on somebody. That's what's in here. What do you think the most powerful tool we have right now to get someone to leave your property voluntarily is? Anybody? A threat to arrest.
Yes.
Well, that threat isn't there anymore. Right? You threaten to arrest, if you don't leave, we're going to have to arrest you. We can deal with all the issues you're having, you can deal with it another time, but if you don't leave this property right now, we're going to have to detain you. Okay, that's the most effective tool you have to stopping, because, okay, wait, maybe I've gone a bit too far. I don't want to be arrested. I got heat of the moment. Not the case anymore. And if you don't think criminals are going to figure that out pretty quick, you're wrong. They're going to. Okay? It also allows anonymous complaints to be filed against any police officer. Now, here's a huge problem. Now, we accept the anonymous complaints and we do investigate them. Okay? But they are allowing the ITSB to remove a police officer from the job, end his career from an anonymous complaint. Anyone see a constitutional problem with that? Not being able to face your accused? Yeah, that's another reason why it's being sued, that there's a lawsuit against it. Okay? Fingerprinting requirement. This is the current law. The current law, not that law. All policing bodies of this state shall furnish to the Illinois State Police daily, in the form and detail the Illinois State Police requires, fingerprints. All persons who are arrested on charges of violating offenses, they're classified as felonies, and Class A or B misdemeanors. So Class B misdemeanor, our police officers are required to fingerprint them. Yet we have a new law that says we can't touch them and can't detain them. How exactly are we going to get this done? So this puts our police officers in quite the predicament. Okay? Now, I'm going to bring up the chief, because this isn't the only predicament that the police officers face, but he can walk through this a lot better than I can. Here's a couple of flow charts of what the police have to deal with.
Thank you, Matt. First of all, I want to say thanks for coming out tonight. Hopefully this presentation will get you some answers to some of the questions you may have. It's very informative. But this is what we're going to be dealing with, my officers, come January 1st, 2023. So as you can see, traffic offense, Class B, Class C misdemeanor. Traffic offense, driving on a suspended license, Class A misdemeanor, you got to be fingerprinted. Well, we just heard that you can't fingerprint them for this. Is there proper identification? So the officer's going to have to sit down and go through this whole flow chart here. Yes, proper identification. Are they a threat? Does the person pose an obvious threat to the community or person? So that liability is going to be put on the officer. So the officer says, no, they're not a threat. Go down. But tomorrow, that person that the officer left goes and kills somebody. What's going to happen? 1983 lawsuit. Here we go.
And what he means by that is the officer will be sued civilly for that, because the officer does not have immunity, whereas judges do.
So he is a threat. So they claim the person is a threat. Yes, it goes across. He's being arrested, brought into custody of the police station for local booking. He goes to a detention hearing. Right? The judge says, no, we have the detention hearing. He's not a threat. Well, you just illegally detained this guy. So now he could be sued civilly for that. Right? Because we don't have any case law on this law right now. There's nothing out there. In furtherance, the last step, law enforcement shall issue a citation in lieu of custodial arrest. Person shall be scheduled into court within 21 days. You know how much direction we've gotten from the Cook County State's Attorney on this? We have zero. We don't know what we're going to give them. We don't have any forms we're supposed to give this person. We're 2.5 months out. And we don't have any cooperation from the Cook County State's Attorney Office on what we're supposed to do, when they're supposed to go to court, what courtroom they're supposed to go to. Very convoluted, 764 pages of contradictory information of current law to this new law. This is a mess. This is a mess. And this is only for citations. The next slide is for somebody that we're taking in custody. So the person's being arrested and brought to the police station. The offense is one for which pretrial release may be denied under 110.6.1. So yes, they go before a judge. No. Go down to the next one. The presumption in favor of release without appearing before a judge shall be applied by arresting officer and exercise their discretion. So now it's the officer's discretion on whether they're going to send this person in front of the judge or if they're going to release them. Not the judges. Right now it's the judge's discretion on whether they're going to release somebody. But now they're putting that back on the officer. And again, the same scenario. So if he does send them and the judge says, no, he's not a threat, you just violated civil rights. And if you do, then there's circumstances that justify the officer using the general discretion. Yes, you release him. You release him and he goes and he kills somebody. Well, he was a threat. Why didn't you send him in front of the judge? This is a no-win situation here on citations and custody. And again, no direction from the Cook County State's Attorney and their policies and how they want to enforce this. So I'm going to turn it back over to the Mayor now.
And I think what's important here is, if you remember the body cam thing, that was clearly trying to target police officers. This is too, and I've heard this from multiple chiefs at the Sheriff of DuPage County. They feel like this is intentionally being written to target police officers. So that's what's happening here. We pointed out there are some good things in this law. But here's the thing. Anytime you do something like this in the middle of the night, there's a lot of bad in it. And good laws, it's the bad stuff in laws that are brutal, right? So this thing should be thrown out and start and deal with each issue separately and bring the right people, bring all the stakeholders to the table for this, okay? Because here's the deal. If you're a business right now, you are currently in the middle of budgeting, or you're finishing your budgeting, right? And you need to determine now, do you need security cameras so that you can see if you have to be responsible for removing somebody, you're going to need cameras to support your position if you get taken to court. Depending on your business, are you going to hire security? Because we can't remove someone. Is that security going to be armed or not? Is that security going to be allowed to put a hand on somebody or not? Right? I mean, currently places with security have those procedures, right? But now all businesses are going to have to consider that. What does that mean to your costs for your business? What does it mean to your insurance costs? Because every time you add security, it adds insurance costs. Not just security costs, but insurance costs. You decide to arm them, more cost. That all gets factored in here, okay? So that's important. You as an individual, why is this important? That trespassing issue is a huge one because we can't put a hand on somebody. That means it may be up to you to determine whether or not to remove someone from the property because our police officers' hands may be tied. So you're going to have to decide how much force is reasonable. How many of you are trained in the use of force, like our officers? I don't see a single hand going up here. So that's the problem, right? So there's a lot of potential problems. It's scary. I don't mean to be the person trying to scare you, but the fact is we don't know what's going to happen. I'm very concerned about people taking the law into their own hands because that's what this potentially could lead to. Okay? Some counties have made the decision that they're going to release people on January 1. Think about that. January 1, Illinois, a little cold. These people don't have anyone to pick them up. They don't have jobs. They don't have shelter. And trespassing is allowed. What could possibly go wrong? Right? I mean, a lot of bad things could happen. And this wasn't well thought through at all. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I got a question too. What are the chances of the lawsuits stopping some of this? And why did they do this?
Okay, so two questions there. One is, what is the chance of lawsuits stopping this? And two, why did they do this? So lawsuits stopping this. I think in any time, in any reasonable time frame, the chances of lawsuits stopping this are fairly slim, although there could be a stay on it, potentially, that delays it. It'll take a long time for lawsuits to be heard on this, like years. Whether or not it gets stayed, I don't know. I'm hopeful, but we don't know that that'll happen. As far as why did they do this, you'll have to ask the motivation of some of the people that were involved in this. Obviously, there's this whole push for criminal justice reform. And should there be some reform? Sure, there's things that we can always improve upon. But they went and threw all of that, quite frankly, woke justice reform into this bill. And it clearly was designed to attack police officers. There's no question about that. When you read just the body cam stuff that was put into the first bill, it was designed to end officers' careers. That body cam law just alone, which is why we refused to put them in body cameras. Now, they did clean that part of the law up, but that's why it was there.
As a business owner, what liabilities do I have of removing somebody physically or with Smith & Wesson?
So you will have the same liabilities you have currently if you choose to do that, and you will have to prove that your life was in danger and all of the things that your attorney can tell you. Right. So you would have to prove that you use the appropriate level of force for the threat that you encountered and prove that to the jury. But think about the fact that you could be tried for that, deal with that, go to court for that, have years of that in your life, right? Because you're just trying to protect yourself. So that's a problem.
You mentioned there's no case law. Are there any other states currently operationally handling their situations with the negatives that this law will bring into effect that can be looked at, presumably, so that it would be an indication to us? Or do we have to have Illinois case law after the law is enacted to set precedent?
So I know that New Jersey has some form of this and New York has some form of this, but it doesn't go anywhere near this far. And I would tell you, I don't think any of us would consider New Jersey or New York to be extremely safe places either. So I can't tell you how well their laws are relatively new. Can't tell you how well they're, but they don't go as far as this. This one goes further than any other.
I was wondering, would this affect the schools? Like, where you have safety officers in schools? And I was reading in Chicago that you no longer have them.
Okay, so would this affect the schools and safety officers in schools is the question. So yes, this affects the schools. If the school door is open and someone walks in, it's not breaking and entering and they're trespassing. Technically, we can't remove them. Now, I will tell you, and Chief will tell you, that we're going to stretch this law to the very limits. If we think they need to be removed, we'll remove them and deal with the lawsuit. That's how we're going to handle it, okay? But, and there's the but, we're likely to be sued, and the village is likely to be sued, and that's going to cost a lot of taxpayer dollars to defend that lawsuit, and it's going to wind its way through. Case law on this stuff is going to take years before these cases go to court.
Can you tell us more about the 2 part-time ATF agents and how they're going to affect this?
So we've entered into an agreement with ATF that once it's implemented, it's not implemented yet, but the agreement's signed by us, that the part-time ATF agents, they still are officers, but they're part-time ATF agents. And Chief, correct me if I'm out of line here with anything that I say. But they will be allowed to take a case that is a federal offense, and they'll be able to take it straight to the Assistant U.S. Attorney, okay, and work directly. Right now, we have to go through a bunch of hoops to get to the U.S. Attorney. We could go straight, those 2 officers could go straight to the U.S. Attorney. And if the U.S. Attorney decided to charge, federal law, they could potentially hold these people behind bars. So obviously, anytime we see an opportunity to do that, we would do that to get a violent criminal off the street. That would be how we would look to do this. And the other thing is, any investigations that are done, any overtime occurred, the FBI, ATF would pay for that, Department of Justice.
We currently do that now with the federal agencies. We work with them hand in hand. The ATF agreement that's still in negotiation, so that we've been solidified.
Yeah, it hasn't been implemented yet, but the agreement's been signed. So we just got to wait for it to be fully implemented. So, and we do some of that now. We cooperate with them, but it just takes it's a longer process. This will be a much more streamlined process.
Somebody decides they want to move into my shed, they have to break through one of the gates to get there. So I'm guessing that's no longer simple trespassing if they have to break.
I'll turn that one over to the chief.
We can't have a question.
He's going to repeat it.
So his question was, if somebody decided to take residency up in his shed, pretty much.
But they broke through the gate.
broke through the gates. So, lock gates. So, like I mentioned in the earlier session this morning, the Orland Park Police Department is going to do everything in our power to keep the residents safe, the business owners safe, and the people traveling through our town safe, okay? That's what we're going to do. Now, the officers may be handcuffed by this bill, or by this law here, but we're going to do everything because you're going to feel threatened, I'm sure, if somebody's breaking into your house, breaking into your backyard, right? It's a threat, and so they'd be removed. They would be arrested. Okay? We're not going to let people come and swim in your swimming pool and sleep in your shed. That's not going to happen in Orland Park.
And the problem with, he's exactly right. That's the position we're going to take. I'm sure our board members are going to raise both hands, and all of our other board members will raise and say we fully support exactly what the police department is doing. But I can tell you the board is also prepared for the lawsuit that we'll see the next week, because we'll get sued. Can guarantee you. And that's not just going to be us, it's going to be other departments that take that position throughout the state, and several of them are going to take that position. But I can tell you right now, with the state's attorneys, that some state's attorneys are taking the position that they're going to release prisoners on January 1st. I can promise you, Kim Fox is taking that position. You think she's going to miss an opportunity to kick a bunch of people out of the jail, her and Tom Dart? I don't think so, right? So, in any case, I hear someone commenting low level. Believe me, they're not keeping anyone with low level crimes in Cook County jails at the current time. They are letting them all walk free. They are letting people with, they're letting people with UUW Class X. Here, I'll give you a really good example. And Chief, correct my facts if I'm wrong on this one. We had an individual at the mall that there was a car at the mall, suspicious car. We checked the plates out, they didn't match. We looked inside the car, we saw weapons inside the car. We sat on the car. Person comes out to the car. We basically stopped them from moving. They resist. There were 2 of them and a minor. The male suspect, so there's 2 guns, was on probation for armed robbery and attempted murder. On probation. Okay? So he's been to jail for this already. been to jail 3 times for violent crimes since 2008. I think one of our officers said the baddest guy he's ever seen since he's been an officer. Okay? That individual went to Cook County. Cook County gave them a $5,000 bond. So $500, and that guy walks out on the street. Now we monitor these things. So we saw it. We contacted the Department of Justice because he was there on federal probation. They put a hold on this guy Monday morning. Fortunately, he did not post bail between when he got it and Monday morning, so he wasn't out in the wind. Okay? They held him. Well, if you recall, that got a lot of news. I think 3 or 4 different local news organizations covered that. Embarrassed the state's attorney's office, so they sent him back to a new judge on Thursday, and he held him without bond. Now, how do you go from $500 to get out to being held without bond in the same court system? Okay? This guy was a danger to society. Okay? So those are the types of people that have been let go in Cook County. Don't kid yourself. Okay? It's got the lowest number of prisoners we've had in decades in the county jail. Okay?
He will not be released. He's on probation. He's had prior convictions like that. He will not be released.
So the lady says that he will not be released. The fact was, he went to court and he was given a $5,000 bond. So for $500, had he posted that bond on Saturday or Sunday, he would have been released. He was not released because the federal government put a hold on him. That's why. Okay?
The purpose of the Safety Act is to eliminate bail. If somebody's rich enough or has friends enough to get out of jail, that's one thing.
Well, thank you for your comments. I understand where you're going. Here's the thing: the judge would have the same discretion here to let this person walk free. The judge would have that same discretion. So,
the judge will keep them.
well, that's not what we've seen in Cook County. That's not the experience that we have. Chief, is that the experience that? So. Well, thank you very much, but give me the.
Will keep more criminals in because now they can't even post a bond.
Good, they should stay in.
So if they can't post a bond, if they cannot post a bond, they cannot release. Thank you for your comments. If they can't post a bond, then they can't be released. So I'm just saying that the Cook County State's Attorney, we know. Well, I'm going to go back to who supports this. 100 state's attorneys oppose this. Every chief, the chiefs organizations, every police union opposes this bill, as do 100 state's attorneys. Kim Foxx supports it. Those are the policies that she wants. Is that kept you safe in Cook County or Chicago? No. That's exactly the point. So, and I guess I'll make the other point. I will make the other point. The judges currently, by the way, have discretion. So the judges can do this now. Okay? 764 pages, passed overnight. Does this seem like the way legislation is supposed to be done? Thank you very much. So, no, it's not supposed to be done. So, any other questions?
Would it be possible for the residents of Orland Park to establish a lawsuit fund to assist with any lawsuits that would...
You already provide a lawsuit fund. It's called your taxes. So, unfortunately, as the lawsuit fees go up, we're going to have to find out ways to pay for it. That's just the reality.
With all of this upheaval over this Safety Act, did our state legislature pass this? I mean, was it there?
So the question is, did our state legislature pass this? So I'm going to go back to the slide here. So the state legislature passed this on January 13th, 2021, in the middle of the night, in the last day of the lame duck session, before they left office. So these people, January 13th of 2021, many of them who were not going to be in office in a week, passed it. Because there's no consequences, because they're not going to be in office again. Okay? The people that are sitting in the office now, there aren't enough votes to pass it. Okay? Unless they change their votes. But they've also said, we're going to... So you've heard this time and again for those people, oh, this is good. Well, then why did you need 2 trailer bills? And then why do you say you need more trailer bills after this is over? Now, my next question is to you, does anyone believe that in the lame duck session after the election, so heard the governor say it today. We will address this after the election. Oh, really? So after you're reelected, now you're going to address it. You had 2 years to address it, and you haven't addressed it. Sorry if I don't trust you. And again, it'll be in a lame duck session where people are not held accountable because many of them are leaving office willingly or unwillingly, right? So they're not going to, it's highly unlikely that this will be fixed.
Which nearby villages are, with you on this? Obviously, Tinley Park, right?
So which nearby villages are with us on this? So I think Naperville, Tinley Park, I think Willow Springs is considering it. I think Oak Brook passed something. There's been a bunch that have passed it. I don't know all of the ones. Oak Forest, for sure, has passed something. So several have passed something. And again, I go back to their 100 states attorneys and 12 lawsuits from states attorneys. These are states attorneys. These are people who are there upholding the law, trying to keep you safe. That's what they're trying to do. And they're saying this is bad. And this is Democrats and Republicans alike. And they're saying this is bad. Okay? Jim Glasgow is a Democrat in Will County. His job is to keep people safe. Bob Berlin's Republican in DuPage County. His job is to keep you safe. That's what they do. Here's another one for you. And because I've been in DuPage a lot recently, as you might imagine, Sheriff Mendrick in DuPage, who is so popular he's unopposed for his reelection, okay? He does some very interesting and good things at the county jail, okay? As he points out, it's a correction facility. It's not a penitentiary like Joliet, okay? It's a corrections facility. So when he gets someone in, they're usually being held for trial, okay? That's who usually is in the county jail, okay? And he says 80% of the people that come there are on drugs, okay? So the first thing they do is they clean them up. They get them off of drugs, okay? And then they get them into rehab, okay? They have programs inside the jail. Then they do a lot of job training and things like that, and education and things like that while they're in there, because they don't want to see them again, right? And he said his recidivism rate, I believe, is under 30% of people he does. So he's doing really good work. Here's what happens. The day this goes into effect, that program ends, right? Because those people aren't going to get the help they need, right? So, you know, there's a lot of puts and takes in this, but the one thing that's for sure is in 764 pages, you're not going to get good stuff, okay? They need to break it into smaller pieces and deal with those pieces one at a time and engage the public. And they didn't do that. Other questions?
How does this act affect minors who commit horrible crimes like murder or manslaughter?
How does this affect minors?
Who commit crimes like
It's a great question because it doesn't, well, I didn't read all 764 pages to get through it. I tried, but I haven't seen anything here in minors. But right now, they don't hold minors anyways.
for anything?
Minors know that's why you're seeing these carjackings all throughout the city and the suburbs. A lot of them are by minors, and they're releasing them, and they know it. They know it. They walk in there and they tell the judge. They know that they're going to be cut loose right away. Yeah. So I don't think this affects minors.
And to the chief's point, that's why a lot of these gangs actually use the minors to do this, because they know the minors will be let go. Okay? So.
Hey, Keith, wouldn't you think there's a lot of big money from certain people in this country, maybe out of this country, causing a lot of this stuff?
So the question is there a lot of money from outside of this country impacting this? And yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a big secret that there's some people that have been funding this. George Soros has been funding this for a long time throughout the country. He did a lot of funding for Kim Foxx to get elected, so he does that, right? He's got dual citizenship, I think, so he's allowed to do it. That's just the way that that's the way that it is. So.
Why can't we stop?
They have the right, anyone has the right to support candidates. That's part of our political process. And the way to win this...
Somebody's talking over here.
So everyone please calm down and be respectful. We're being respectful of you, so please be respectful of us. Thank you. So at the end of the day, people have the right to vote. They also have the right to support whatever candidates they want to support. They can support them monetarily within the law as far as how those donations are received. So that's allowed. Okay? So the best thing you can do is get out and exercise your most important right, which is to vote.
I think, Mayor, it's bad enough that the legislators and the governor allowed this to pass, but who actually wrote this bill? I would guess that maybe there's a few intelligent people in our legislature. They cannot write 764 pages of technical stuff like this. So who's it subbed out to?
Well,
There's got to be
I don't know specifically who wrote it. I can tell you that the chief sponsor of this was Justin Slaughter, who, by the way, now will represent half of Orland Park. So he is the chief sponsor of this bill. So yes.
Well, I did check with two of our representative and state senator. Fortunately, for what it's worth, they voted against this. Hurley and Cunningham, they said they voted against it, so
they did.
I don't know what's going to happen after this.
So the comment there was about contacting senators and representatives who voted against it. So keep in mind, this had bipartisan opposition. Okay, this passed with the bare minimum number of votes. But there are 3 representatives and senators that voted for it that will be representatives and senators potentially after that are running. Potentially after this next election. So if you want to stop this, because no one's asked that question, but I was asked it this morning, so I'll tell you. This is how you stop it. You stop it by voting people in who will repeal it, and by voting in a governor who won't veto it. Okay? Those are the 2 things that you have to, I mean, that's just how it will be stopped. That's the reality. Okay? The fastest way to stop it is legislatively. Okay? So, who voted for it? Justin Slaughter, Emil Jones, who has no opponent and is also under federal indictment for bribery. So yeah, you got that to look forward to, because there is no opposition to him. And then Michael Hastings. Now, Michael Hastings, I spoke to specifically about this bill. Okay? I spoke to him. It's one thing to disagree. It's one thing to tell me you support it or don't support it. It's another thing to tell me that I don't support this bill, I'm a father, it's a horrible bill, and there's no way I will ever vote for it. And then not only go vote for it, but get the votes needed to pass it. Michael Hastings has disqualified himself from being a representative of you simply because he cannot be trusted whatever he says. It's not because he disagrees on this bill. It's because he flat out cannot be his word cannot be trusted. I haven't spoken to him since. There's no point. Can't trust him. So, and then obviously the governor signed it. So those are the 4 people that will be on the ballot that you can impact.
I'm really, this bill that came out with a state with the crime rate that it has and the murder rate that it has, it's really, really unbelievable. What we need to do is take our country back and vote red on November 8th.
No. I'm not going to get into the politics here because it's a village event, other than to tell you who voted for it and against it. As John McCannon said over here, Hurley and Cunningham are Democrats and they voted against this bill. So, and they're representing you. So you have to make your call on who you're voting for and why. I'm telling you the ones that voted for this thing that I think, you know, if you want it, truthfully, if you want this to be gone, you have to vote people who voted for this thing out. So.
What are those names again?
Justin Slaughter, Emil Jones, and Michael Hastings. And then Governor Pritzker signed it.
How do we get more information on these judges? I've been following quite a bit of these people being arrested. In several cases, one judge gives them a high bond that they can't get, but then another judge lowers the bond and a mother or a girlfriend when it comes.
I'm not in the courts, so it's really hard for me to tell you which judges do their jobs correctly and not. You know, police. So I don't even know how you can get that info, because here's the thing: police officers know, but they're apolitical, so they're not going to get involved in that, right? So, my best suggestion to you is to talk to attorneys that you know privately. And get their opinions. Talk to people you know that maybe deal with the court system that you know. That's probably the best way. They may have some idea, but I can tell you that I certainly don't. have any, because I don't have that interaction on a day-to-day basis. We know that it's bad.
Of some of them, because I've been following this for a while, it's awful. These judges, they need to go. But I have a list if anybody wants a copy.
Okay. She said she has a list of judges that she's been tracking, so if you want them.
What do you think the end game is for these Democrats to come up with these stupid laws? I mean, but there was one, the bill got squashed, where they wanted to let pedophiles move closer to cars.
Well, so what do I think the question is, what do I think the end game is? I don't know what their end game is. I think they're trying to change the way the country operates. I think that's pretty clear. I think one of the more dangerous bills that are out there now that have been tried to be pushed through, there's two that have been tried to be pushed through. One is to make fentanyl a misdemeanor, not a felony. So that's one that's been pushed several times. They won't vote on it before the election, but they'll vote on it after the election. And the other one is to basically eliminate the ability to do what Chicago does and say resource officers are not allowed in schools. That has also been pushed forward. And I think that has a really good chance of passing after this next election. Okay? Resource officers in schools. That's what Chicago does. Again, I get back to, do we want Chicago values? Or would Chicago benefit more from our values? I think that answer is pretty obvious. You know, we can ask Chief Rossi. I mean, we currently have a request to put more resource officers in the school from the school district. And it's not because we're having a terrible amount of problems, but they just see the benefits of having an officer around interacting with students. We see the positive of that at Sandburg. It's very, very positive. It's positive for us. It's positive for the community. It's positive for the kids. You know, my kids were really good kids, and they still remember the resource officer they had because he had a relationship with a lot of the kids in the school. So I think that's really important. And they're trying to remove that ability to even do that. I think that's, you know, that's a mistake. Again, it's trying to change the way we operate and bring the city's values to the state, which they do through gerrymandering anyways, with the way all of these different districts go into the city. The city is overrepresented and has been for decades, right? And so more of their values on the whole state, and that's what we've seen, and we've seen the states decline. So.
Just to bring up a point, in the Tribune and in the Sun-Times, it was reported that two gangs were shooting at each other. No one got killed, no one got bullets in the body. And they asked Kim Fox what charges she was going to bring against those fellas. And guess what her comment was? They were only mutual combatants.
So the comment there was that two gangs were shooting at one another, no one got shot, so what charges was Kim Fox going to bring? She said nobody, mutual combatants. I'll go a little bit further. We had an Orland Park resident killed on the Dan Ryan, two gangs shooting at one another. The gang they caught, it was not the bullets that matched the person who was shot, so they let them go because they were mutual combatants. So because they didn't catch the actual person who fired it, okay? So that actually happens, and it's not good. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question?
You've been making statements the entire time, so I'm going to go to someone else.
Starting in January, will anything be changed as far as the 911 system?
Excuse me one second.
I'm sorry.
I can't hear what she's saying because you're talking over her again. So please let her speak. I don't think have you had the opportunity to ask a question yet?
No.
Okay, so please ask your question.
Starting in January, will anything be affected by calling the 911 system when we see something happening, or a crime, a carjacking, somebody hurting somebody? Do we still call 911?
So the question was, should we still call 911? Absolutely. Still see something, say something, and as Chief Rossi said, we're going to push the envelope on this because our job is to keep you safe. And if we're the test cases for lawsuits, we'll be the test cases for lawsuits. Our police department does a phenomenal job, okay? Phenomenal job. We get very, very few complaints. We're probably the busiest, because of our size and because of 12 million square feet of retail, we're probably one of the busiest departments in the suburbs, correct?
For sure.
For sure, right, with the number of calls. How many calls? Over 200,000?
Yes.
Okay, over 200,000 calls. Out of those over 200,000 calls, Chief, how many complaints did we have last year?
Less than 30, I believe.
Less than 30. I think the number was 25 complaints we had last year for our police officers. How many of those were founded?
2 maybe?
Yeah, I think 2 or 3.
Maybe on a policy violation?
And they were policy violations. So they just violate our policy, so they got retrained. That's a phenomenal job because they interact with a lot of bad people and they're not getting those complaints. And frankly, that's why we support some of these things in here are good. I'm fine. We're fine with those, but they need to be a separate bill that deals with that, and they also need to fund it for those departments that can't afford that, and figure out ways to fund that. And they don't have that. They need to have the policies in place for those departments to do that, and they don't have that, right? So, anything else over here? Nothing? Go ahead.
Hi. Just a comment and maybe a question. I'm not very read well about this issue, but from what I understand and coming here today, it seems to me that this act helps the criminals.
Right.
And it will increase, like I'm afraid of the new year, how many acts of crime we're going to have in Orland Park. And at the same time, it's going to deter, like our police department is wonderful here. And I'm afraid of that people are going to start retiring early that are in law enforcement. And then maybe people that want to go into law enforcement will be deterred by this act. So we're going to have an increase in crime and less protection, how I feel, even though you guys are going to do all you can do. And then on top of it, pay the price because there's nothing that protects you guys. And it just, to me, just seems unfair. And then this statement that mentioned the 48 hours, can you explain that? Because the way I understood it, it makes absolutely sense.
So the comment was about the fact that this seems to, and I think I'm going to summarize it because I've said it on the board floor at least a half a dozen times, because we've been talking about this for 2 years. It's just now hitting the national media because the local media hasn't picked it up at all. This bill prioritizes criminals over law-abiding citizens and police. And I don't think there's any question about that. That's very clear in this bill, okay? And then you had a question, and could you repeat the question?
If I understood.
Oh yeah, the 48 hours. The 48 hours on the ankle monitoring. So what this means is they can basically skip check-ins for 48 hours, disappear for, and you can't go do anything. You can't go track them down. Well, in 48 hours, you can drive to Alaska. I'm not kidding on that. You can actually drive out of the country and into Canada during that time, right? So that's the problem, okay? Or that's just another problem, right? So we're going to ankle monitor people and we can't even go after them when they skip, right? That's a problem. And when they figure that out, they're going to skip. That's just what's going to happen. Question?
Payless has had problems with catalytic converters getting stolen. Have we had any here in Orland Park?
We have had some, so the question is, Payless has had catalytic converters stolen. Have we had any? I'll let the chief answer it.
So unfortunately we have, and I think you're seeing it throughout the suburbs, throughout Illinois. I think it's nationwide, just based on there's precious metals that are in your catalytic converters, platinum, palladium, rhodium, and they're thousands and thousands of dollars for an ounce. So a criminal cuts a catalytic converter off of your car. It's probably going to cost you a few $1,000s to replace it. They'll get $500 for it if they take it to a scrapyard. So we are seeing it out there. We're not seeing it, I would say, as much as some of our other towns that surround us, just because we have a lot of officers that are out there patrolling the streets and maybe they know not to come to Orland.
One last thing about this bill is it has to give the morale to our police department pretty low. It is like, to me, that they want to get rid of the police department, is the bottom line. And I'm really bothered by this. We have a wonderful police department, and we can't let this happen. And even though it's signed, there's got to be a way, maybe when our new governor gets in office, that we can you know,
So-
tweak this.
So the comment, I think, is, you know, this can't go into effect. Well, again, I told you the way that it's not going to go into effect. I mean, that's just the reality. That's the only way it's not going to go into effect. And then also, I think it marries to another comment that you made, which was that police officers are going to lower their morale and cause them to retire early and cause us to have less applicants for the job. I think we're already seeing that. Officers are retiring. Even in Orland Park, we're still seeing early retirements. Not to the extent that other towns are seeing it, tell you that. We're also seeing more people applying here than we see in other towns, but less than we've had in the past, right? So, but we're doing much better than other towns. Some towns aren't seeing anybody, but people do still want to serve for our department because it is so good. But we are seeing early retirements, and it is because of the morale that you mentioned. That's a problem. In fact, I think Chief said something about this bill that he talked about earlier today, and I'll let him just say it here too. About it looks like it targets.
I mean, if you really dive into this bill and take it for all-encompassing, there's some good things in it, right? There's some good things, but the scariest thing is this trespassing, right? That worries me, right? I don't know what the residents are going to do. I don't know what's going to happen out there. But I lost my train of thought here. Targeting police officers. So they passed this bill with the body cams. They mandated to wear a body cam, but you can't review your video. It makes no sense. You find me one person that thinks that makes sense. That they want clear and accurate reports, but yet you can't view your video. You go out there and do the job. You tell me what it's like to run up to somebody that's got a gun, that's firing back at you, and you remember every single thing that happened. That's why I want body cameras. In my mind, they're trying to jam up the police officers, right? The civil rights lawsuits. Attorneys can file a lawsuit for unlawful detention, right? I don't know how this is going to go. There are going to be multiple lawsuits filed against police departments, officers, and villages because of this, unless it's cleared up.
Can I sue the politicians that have passed this law?
They have, so legislative bodies have immunity.
Really, they do?
They do, and
Officers can't.
so the question was, can you sue legislative body? You could, but legislative bodies have immunity, and there's for a reason for that, because they have to be allowed to legislate and do what they think is in the best. You have a vote to get them out of office. If they're elected into office, you get the government, not necessarily that you want, you get the government that you deserve. And that's what happens, unfortunately. So judges have immunity, legislators have immunity, officers don't, and they're putting the burden on officers to make these calls where they don't have the immunity. That's exactly the problem. And, oh, by the way, the state constitution, I believe, gives these powers to judges, correct? Am I correct on that? So one of our attorneys is here, and we have an attorney here too. So that gives the power to judges here, not to officers. So that's one of the reasons why it's being challenged in court, actually, is for that very reason. And another reason that it's being challenged in court, I haven't seen actually that this is one, but I'm sure it is that police officers can lose their jobs without ever meeting their accuser. That's a violation of the Constitution. Okay? You are entitled to see your accuser. You're entitled to know who's accusing you so you can defend yourself. You are eliminating that for police officers. That's not going to hold up, I guarantee you. It may take years, but that's not going to hold up. So that's just the way that it is.
The other thing that I was told is that judges are not held accountable for anything either, because otherwise they, quote, would not be able to make hard decisions.
Well, so the comment was judges aren't held accountable either. Again, you hold them accountable with your vote. Here in Illinois. In other states, they hold them accountable by they can be removed from office from the state legislature. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but in Illinois, for the most part, it's by your vote. So you have the ability to hold them accountable, and that's how you need to hold them accountable. At the end of the day, imagine a world in which every law that was passed, every person who voted on that law was sued by whoever disagreed. I mean, that person, no one would ever be a legislator. No one would ever be a village board member. I can tell you already, we deal with one person who is not mentally stable, who's sued us multiple times, and we have to deal with that. We have to deal with that all the time. Imagine if every decision you make, you were allowed to be sued over that by anybody who disagreed. Well, we have 60,000 people in this town, so I'm going to get sued 30,000 people that or 20,000 people that disagree with me every time we pass a budget, every time we vote on an ordinance, every time we do something. I mean, that's just the way that you exercise your disagreement is you vote them out of office, which is why your vote matters so much, which is why it is important to go to the polls and exercise your most important right. So.
Can I ask the chief a question?
You sure can.
Isn't it true right now, under the current law, when someone been charged with a forcible felony, class X, non-probationable, okay? The judges are still giving them bonds. They're high bonds, right? But guess what? They can still somehow get the money and post their bond, and now they are a forcible felony person. Under this new law, because I take down bonds for it, I'm a court reporter. I sit in it every day. Under this new law, when that person is brought before the judge in pretrial services, gonna rate them, the judge is not gonna let that forcible felon on a bond, because there's no more cash bond. And that judge is gonna hold that person. Now that person doesn't even have the right to have a high bond anymore. They're gonna be sitting until their trial. So,
Thank you for your question. Wait, whoa. Let the chief answer, and I will answer. You asked excuse me. You asked your question.
And then no right to a bond.
Okay, here's what I can tell you through my experience. I've been in the job 20 years. I've been dealing with the Cook County court system for.
Okay, you had your opportunity to. Excuse me. Everyone, the chief is speaking. He has the floor. You asked your question. So please allow him to speak. We gave you the opportunity to ask your question. Give him the courtesy of allowing him to speak. Thank you.
So here's what I can tell you. The way judges set bonds, what I've seen is very inconsistent. Very inconsistent. That may be true on one case. It may be. It may be. But I've seen aggravated domestic batteries where the family member stated they wanted to kill the other member, and they were issued an I bond. That's what I've seen. And I've seen numerous cases where there's low bonds, high bonds. It's very inconsistent when it comes to the bond. And when the person is a threat to the community, in my opinion, they need to be held. Yep. They need to be held.
So I'll present it in a slightly different way. Currently, with non-probationable offenses, judges have the opportunity to hold people without bond. They can do that. They have that discretion currently. Okay? They are very seldom does that ever happen. And the average bond on these felonies that could be held without bond, the average bond for those weapons offenses, $2,500, $250 are out the door. Now, do you think a judge is going to let someone walk out the door for $250 is going to let them go or keep them indefinitely? I think it's much higher likelihood that they're going to let them go. So it's still, yeah, the judge has a discretion now to hold someone. They are not being mandated. They have the discretion currently. So, and to the chief's point about the aggravated domestic battery, that is not an offense that they can be held for. They have to be released. The judges don't have that discretion unless you can prove one of those two things, which is very, very challenging for a prosecutor to prove. Okay? Almost impossible to prove willful flight. Okay? And they're going to go right back into that position. And do you think a judge that already has the discretion, has more discretion now to hold them for longer, could actually hold them behind bars and keep them there, now can't keep them there? You think they are? I just don't think that's a reasonable, a logical conclusion to people's behavior. So now I will tell you that you're way more likely to see them held in DuPage or will or downstate, but Cook County's already not doing it. This gives them even more leeway to let people go. So, any other questions? Well, last one.
Yeah, in the past, a person had to be charged and go to trial within 160 days. I think it was, or 120 days. Now I understand that it's 90 days and they're gone.
It's 90 days currently.
Is it? Oh, okay, it's still 90 days?
Under the new law, yeah, it's 90 days.
Okay, so the 160 days.
Yeah, and what are the odds they're going to get there in 90 days given the court system as we know it and how long it takes to get through things? So,
Now, in the past, police,
last one.
police can hold somebody for up to 72 hours to gather their evidence. Can they do that now?
So the question was, how long can they hold a defendant?
It's a great question, because the state's attorney allows you to hold them for 72 hours.
Yeah.
However, you can be sued civilly if you hold them for more than 48. So what do you think the police departments have to do? We can't hold them for 72, even though the state's attorney says you can hold them for 72, it's fine. 48 hours, 48-hour rule, still in effect. If you hold them for longer, you can be sued civilly, and the state police have been sued for holding them more than 48 hours on a murder case.
So, and I'll close with this. One of the reasons why we've been so successful as a police department in keeping crime down in Orland Park, actual crimes against you or against your property. The weapons offenses don't fall into those categories. We're getting them off the street proactively before they commit another crime. One of the reasons we've been so successful is that we process our evidence either in-house or through outside labs. Okay? And we're getting those back, what, 24 hours we get back most of that evidence? Yeah. So, and the goal of that is now when we have someone in custody, we have the evidence and we can get them charged. If you go through the state, it's 6 months to a year for fingerprinting and DNA evidence? It's getting better, yeah. 6 months to a year to get that evidence back. So what do you have to do? You have to let this defendant go. So now you get the evidence to charge them, and what do you have to do? You have to go try and find them, and you have to put your officers at risk to take them back into custody. You have them in custody. That's one of the reasons why we do that, and one of the reasons why we have such a great department. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I want to thank you all for all the good questions. Okay, and I greatly appreciate it. We thought it was very important for you to be informed. Okay, this was our attorneys reviewed all of this. These are the facts. This is what you're going to have to deal with. As we pointed out, there are some good things in the law, but anytime you pass something like this with 40 minutes to look at it, you're going to get more bad, way more bad. And bad is just, when government does something bad, it's hard to retract it. Okay? And I think we need to err on keeping people safe. And our board has unanimously, more than once, passed a resolution demanding that this be repealed. We continue to stand by that. I would love to, if it's not repealed, I'd love to see all the garbage in here changed. But I don't know how you change 764 pages, and most of it's just got all kinds of issues with it. So I think it needs to be just a clean slate and deal with the policing issues. Deal with criminal justice reform. Deal with these things one thing at a time, but take everyone's points of views into account, not 40 minutes on the board floor in the middle of the night at 4 in the morning. So I can't talk about congressional things. I'm here acting as the mayor, so you can ask me that later. But I will tell you, as a mayor, I put term limits in here in Orland Park. So we put term limits in Orland Park. I can tell you the question about Congress and term limits is that it requires a constitutional amendment, which requires 2/3 of each House and Senate and 3/4 of the states' legislative bodies to pass it. I don't think it's feasible to do it on a national level. So that's what I will tell you about that. I don't think it's really feasible. But at the local level, for sure, it's something that we certainly need to be doing, which is exactly what we did. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming tonight. I appreciate it. And have a good night.